Earth had stopped dreaming of stars by the time the Sorelli Dominion arrived. Silver vessels shaped like skeletal wings blanketed the atmosphere, casting shadows over continents. Satellites fell silent. Borders ceased to matter. Across the fractured remains of governments, the alien invaders didn't demand surrender. They imposed silence. Then they brought the cages. Valera of the Dominion came not with chains, but with judgment. Regal, violet-skinned, her presence was mythic even among her own. Her gaze glowed cold white. Her long hair shimmered like starlight draped in midnight. Crowned in radiant alloy, armored in woven obsidian and gold filigree, she moved like a goddess sculpted from cosmic ambition. She commanded the human regions with detached calculation. Entire cities became quarantine zones. Survivors were selected, some for labor, others for studies. A few, the curious ones, were chosen for the atriums of their high-ranking conquerors. Observation was an old Sorelli habit. Control began with understanding. That's where he came in. The patrol found him outside a shattered hospital in what used to be called Maryland. He had no weapons, only torn clothes and a bruised shoulder. Yet he did not run. When the translator field activated, and Valera addressed him through her guard's comlink, he looked into the hovering lenses without blinking. "Name?" came the synthesized voice. "Does it matter?" he asked, voice hoarse but unwavering. The guards moved forward, prepared to silence him. Valera raised a hand. "Bring him," she said simply. He was taken aboard the Dominion skiff, then transported to her Ark Palace stationed over what remained of the Potomac River. Steel and crystal formed the bones of the floating fortress, with gravity softened by quantum fields. The corridors were sterile, metallic, alien. And in the center was the grand atrium, lush with bioluminescent flora, artificial waterfalls, and surveillance nodes hidden in the canopy. He was placed there, unbound, surrounded by beauty and watched from every angle. His first words when she visited, "This your zoo?" She narrowed her eyes. "Speak carefully. You stand in the presence of a high warden." He stood straighter, though his frame bore bruises and fatigue. "You asked for a name. Fine. Call me Riven. Not that it means anything to you." A flicker of something unfamiliar crossed her expression. She nodded to her attendant. A collar, smooth black, trimmed with glowing silver etching, was placed in her hand. She approached. He didn't flinch when she locked it around his neck. "It's not a punishment," she said, circling him. "It's a symbol. You're mine. And you will remain here, safe, observed, unharmed." He sat down on a stone near the stream and met her gaze. "Like a pet." "If that analogy suits you," she replied. That night, as the stars shimmered through the transparent canopy, she watched him from her chamber's feed. He spoke to no one, ate sparingly, touched the glowing flowers as though they might crumble, slept without covering his face. The next morning he greeted her with a nod. "Do all your guests wear collar?" he asked. "Only the dangerous ones." "Then I must be flattered." She found herself returning to the atrium often. She told herself it was curiosity, data collection, a new form of interrogation. In reality, it was the sound of his voice. He spoke of things, forests he'd seen as a child, stories from books now ashes, songs hummed by his mother before the sky turned gray. He was unfiltered, honest, annoyingly human. She began responding, at first with measured, clipped corrections, then with memories of her own. Starbirth fields over Sorelia's moons, the silken silence of a command bridge mid-orbit, a hunt among drifting crystal reefs of the Vakari belt. One day while she sat in observation, he said, "You ever laugh?" "Laughter is inefficient," she answered. "Sounds like you've never tried it." He lay back in the grass and looked up at the holographic projection of the stars. She watched, uncertain. He had become unpredictable. A week later, a tremor struck the Ark Palace. A minor impact. Gravity shuddered. She stumbled in the corridor, catching herself against a support column. He appeared seconds later. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't require assistance." "Didn't ask what you require." His hand was calloused, warm. He helped her up anyway. The guards flinched. Her command halted them. He didn't smile, but she did. She began visiting without armor. He began speaking without fear. On the 20th night, he sang, a song she didn't understand, in a language long forgotten by her systems. She didn't ask for a translation. Some things were more beautiful, left mysterious. She deactivated the collar manually. No explanation. He touched the space on his neck and looked at her, not with gratitude, but with the strangest, softest defiance. You ever wonder what it's like, he said, stepping closer. To be owned? She raised a brow. I own no one. You did. Not anymore. Their breath was close. The barrier between captor and captive blurred. She saw not defiance in him, but something stronger. Trust. He didn't kneel. She didn't command. And when she touched his face, he leaned into it like gravity had changed. A high warden, once untouchable, stood in silence with a man the stars deemed broken. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The stars above Earth shimmered like cold embers. Valira no longer looked at them with the same detachment she once held for the cosmos. The celestial map, once a symbol of expansion and dominance, now felt irrelevant. Her thoughts were grounded. They circled around one man, Riven, a Terran, a former prisoner, her anomaly. The command chamber still ran with precision. Orders were obeyed without question. Ships moved in elegant silence, and data continued to stream in from observation drones. But within the walls of her private chamber, the atmosphere shifted. She allowed it. She chose it. He was given a room near hers, no longer an atrium display, no longer watched from all angles. The door was unlocked. The guards were dismissed. His collar was not returned. What began as a calculated interest in his resilience had transformed into something she couldn't name without losing her breath. Riven adapted with quiet dignity. He didn't exploit her softness, nor flaunt the freedom she allowed. Instead, he studied her. He asked questions about her people, not out of mockery, but to understand. He memorized Sorelli constellations. He listened when she explained energy lattice dynamics, her voice trailing off when she realized she was sharing secrets meant only for command. He started to make her laugh. Once, during an inspection of the lower decks, she slipped on a wet panel and caught herself on the edge of a drone stabilizer. The incident was minor, but Riven, waiting nearby, witnessed it. I thought Sorelli were incapable of gracelessness, he teased. She shot him a glare, but the corner of her lips curled. She hadn't realized it could feel light, not weakness, just weightlessness. He brought it with him wherever he walked. At night, they sat beneath the sky dome, sometimes in silence, sometimes in stories. He would recount the feel of wind against wheat fields, and she would describe the pressure tides of Sorelia's twin moons. One night, as the artificial sky cycled through auroral simulation, she rested her head on his shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't speak, but his hand found hers. She didn't pull away. It was not meant to last. Voices began to murmur among the officers, a warden consorting with a human, a former captive no less. Whispers slid like ice beneath armor. Protocols were cited. Doctrine was invoked. The Dominion was not built on sentiment. Affection was an inefficient variable. The first confrontation came during a strategy session. Commander Raleigh, her second-in-command, waited until the last officer exited before speaking. He sleeps 2 chambers from your, Raleigh said, eyes locked forward. The guards say he walks freely, that he joins you at meals, that he touches your hand. Valira stood by the holographic war table. Her eyes didn't leave the glowing grid. Do you accuse me of dereliction? I ask if you still serve the Dominion. Silence expanded. I serve, she said, voice calm. But I am not a drone. He is a human. He is Riven. Raleigh bowed his head slightly. The court will hear of this. Let them. Later that evening, she found Riven near the atmospheric fountain. He was sitting cross-legged, watching a stream of vapor swirl into shifting colors. They know, she said. He didn't ask who. He simply nodded. Do you regret it? He asked. Her eyes reflected the fountain's glow. What we've done, it defies every law I was raised to follow. Then say the word. I'll disappear. You'll be safe. She stepped forward. You think I want safety? He met her gaze. I think you want to breathe. I haven't breathed since I first set foot on this world, she whispered. Not until you. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heart. Do you know what they'll do to you? He asked. I know what I will do for you. That night she discarded her crown, left it on a crystalline pedestal, and didn't look back. In the dark warmth of her chamber, they became something more than their pasts, something the stars could neither define nor deny. But the galaxy has ears. Within a cycle, a Surreali envoy arrived. 3 warships, 12 adjudicators in mirrored armor. A tribunal was declared, not to question her command, but to determine her loyalty. The hearing was held in the observation dome. Riven stood behind a transparency barrier, unseen but watching. Valira did not kneel. She did not wear her crown. She dressed in the formal robes of the Dominion, stripped of rank. The High A. Adjudicator's voice echoed like thunder. Do you deny companionship with the human? No. Do you deny removing his collar? I removed it. Do you deny his presence in your private chambers? He sleeps beside me. Gasps rose, disbelief, outrage, silence. Then by Surreali code, you are no longer bound to your command? So be it, she replied. The tribunal dismissed her in stunned silence. Ralek approached her quietly as the room cleared. You just gave up everything. She turned to him. Number I chose something real. When she returned to her quarters, Riven was waiting. They stripped you? She nodded. He stepped closer. And you don't hate me for it? I've hated myself longer than I've known you. But today, I don't. She took his face in her hands gently, reverently. No more titles, she said. No more cages. No more hiding. He pressed his forehead against hers. Then let them come. Whatever happens. I'm yours. She closed her eyes. And I, yours. They left the Ark Palace before dawn, before the light simulators could rise. The halls felt hollow without her authority coursing through them. Silent attendants no longer bowed. Doors no longer opened on command. But Valira didn't flinch. Her steps were measured, poised. She wore simple travel armor, dark with no insignia, and walked beside Riven like an equal. Riven kept his rifle across his back, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. He had once been prey in this very structure, a study subject, a petter. But now he walked beside a former warden, and every glance exchanged between them bore quiet promise. They didn't run. Running meant fear. Instead, they moved through corridors, out the cargo port, and into the shuttle bay under a veil of stolen access codes and silence. Ralek watched from a catwalk high above. He didn't signal the alarm. Their departure went unchallenged. The shuttle broke atmosphere swiftly, ducking under Dominion patrol routes, then dropped into the cloud shadows of Earth's eastern ridge. For the first time in months, real weather touched them. Rain lashed the hull. The wind howled across shattered plains. Earth, battered but alive, welcomed them home. They landed on the outskirts of a ruined settlement, once a coastal town, now half swallowed by overgrowth and silence. Towering grass moved with the breath of the ocean. Half-collapsed houses leaned into one another like old ghosts. There they made their sanctuary. The days passed in rebuilding. Riven fashioned shelter from scavenged solar tiles and carbon mesh. Valira, once a commander of planetary sieges, now pressed her hands into the soil to understand how Earth still breathed. They spoke less, but not out of distance. Their quiet became fluent, their silence sacred. One morning she found him gazing at the horizon with a peculiar expression. What troubles you? She asked. He gestured toward the water. When I was a kid, I used to think the sea held answers. Like if you stared long enough, it'd whisper back. She tilted her head. And now? He turned to her, his smile faint. Now I think the sea is like you. Beautiful, mysterious, dangerous if misunderstood. She moved beside him and took his hand. Then listen better. They kissed there, with the wind rushing past like laughter. She no longer feared the closeness. She welcomed it. That night he pulled a small box from a hidden compartment in their shelter. Inside was a band of steel, bent and imperfect, but polished smooth. I know your people don't do this, he said, but mine did. She looked at the band, then at him. You would bind yourself to me? She asked softly. Number I would choose you freely, every morning, every breath, even if the stars fall. She took the ring, pressed it to her lips, then slipped it onto her own finger. Her glowing eyes shimmered. Then in front of no empire, no court, no gods, I choose you too. They spent the following weeks in peace, but the galaxy does not forget. 3 Dominion scouts arrived in the valley, their cloaked ships disrupting the soil with silent descent. They came not to punish, but to retrieve. The new High Warden sought to erase Valira's treason and reclaim the anomaly she had bonded with. She met them at the edge of the settlement, unarmed. Riven stood behind her, rifle gripped tight. "Former Warden Valira," the lead scout intoned, voice filtered through a mask. "You are summoned to the throne spiral. Come willingly or be detained." "I will not return," she said. "You have broken foundational codes." "I've rewritten them." The scout shifted. "You are bonded with the human?" "Yes," she said. "He is my chosen." The pause in their formation was slight, but telling. "That designation is not recognized. Then your code is obsolete." They moved. Riven raised his weapon. But before a shot could be fired, a new sound filled the air, one that hadn't been heard in weeks, a Sorelli transmission beacon. And it wasn't from the scouts. A ship, matte black and lined with obsidian veins, descended from the clouds. Its markings bore no Dominion crest, but the design was unmistakably Sorelli. Raleigh stepped from the ramp. He faced the scouts, who immediately lowered their weapons. "Return to your vessel," he said with command only a former second could muster. "This territory is no longer under Dominion jurisdiction." "You hold no authority," the scout protested. "I do," said Raleigh, pulling out a scroll of encoded command permissions. "Signed by 12 generals who believe the Dominion is dying, replaced not with rebellion, but reason." The scouts exchanged wary glances. Then, wordless, they departed. Valira watched as the ship disappeared into the atmosphere. Riven lowered his rifle slowly. "You followed us," she said. Raleigh nodded once. "I watched you sacrifice power for something they'll never understand. That gave me hope." She stepped forward. "You risked exile." "I chose my warden," he replied, "even if the stars fall." That night, around a fire made from Earth's ruined timber, they sat as three. Raleigh didn't speak much, but he smiled when Valira leaned her head against Riven's shoulder. The stars above twinkled without judgment. A former conqueror, her once captive, and a soldier torn from dogma, all bound not by laws but by choice. The empire would rage, yes, but love had taken root, and roots, once deep enough, could crack even the hardest stone. The seasons shifted slowly over the broken world. Earth, stubborn and wild, began to show signs of quiet healing. Vines reclaimed stone. Sky cleared more often than it clouded. Even the air carried less dust, as if sensing that war no longer ruled these hills. Within the small outpost, once no more than a fractured ruin of steel and silence, a life bloomed. Riven had rebuilt the shelter into a home. It was angular, not elegant, part Terran survival, part Sorelli precision. Solar webbing powered their food systems. A filtered dome protected their crops. The edge of their sanctuary bloomed with violet ferns brought from Valira's starship before they abandoned it, now thriving in Earth's soil. Each day they woke side by side. No sirens, no command tones, no security drones whirring overhead, only breath and light in each other. Valira was no longer the warden, yet there was a quiet nobility in how she moved. She repaired panels with bare hands, tended the glowing ferns, carved names into stone markers for the Terran dead, whose identities had never been known. It was her way of making peace, with the past, with herself. And she laughed now, not with politeness or calculation, but freely, like someone who remembered joy and finally trusted it wouldn't be taken. Riven would sit on the rise above the settlement in the evenings, watching the stars peek through the dusk. He no longer felt caged. His body bore the scars of captivity, but his soul no longer flinched. He had chosen this woman, this strange, fierce exile, and she had chosen him back, not as a symbol, not as rebellion, but as a man. On the 10th rotation since their escape, a signal reached them, not from the Dominion, not from Earth's old satellites, but from the reachless band, a territory where exiled fleets drifted, unclaimed by empire. It was a request for parley. Valira read the message twice, then again. Riven saw her hands tighten slightly around the tablet. They want to speak, she said. Who? Others. Former Sorelli, deserters, leaders with no home who watched our trial broadcast. They want to meet, to ask how we broke free. Riven tilted his head. You think it's real? They use the old phrasing, in witness of the broken flame. Only the dissident fleets would dare. Then we go, he said without pause. She looked at him. If we leave, we may not return. The Empire watches the skies. Riven walked toward her. His hand touched her cheek. I don't need the sky. I only need the path you're on. They set out at dawn. Rollick stayed behind to protect the homestead. He stood atop the ridge, watching the vessel ascend, his eyes heavy but proud. The journey through the stratosphere felt different, no longer like a chase, more like a pilgrimage. They flew low beneath Dominion detection lines and rose only when crossing into the band's dark zone, uncharted, unmonitored. There, among shattered moons and drifting stations, they found the ship that had called. The vessel bore no flag. Its hull was patched with foreign steel. But when Valera stepped aboard, no weapons were drawn. The crew bowed, not in reverence but in recognition. A tall alien woman with burnished copper skin and 6 luminous eyes greeted them. You are the ones who loved in defiance, she said. We watched. We believed. The gathering was small, no more than a dozen exiles, a fractal priestess from the void temples, a captain who had refused to burn a civilian colony, a scientist who'd erase memory records of children taken during the war. Each had been punished. Each had walked away. Now they looked to Valera and Riven not as leaders, but as proof. For hours they talked, shared stories, maps, ideas for a sanctuary world beyond Dominion borders, somewhere others could come, be safe, be chosen, not ruled. When the night ended, they stood on the bridge of the exile's ship, watching Earth's dim curve far below. Riven spoke softly. You're building something new. We are, Valera said. And you still want me in it? She turned. Her eyes glowed faintly, like stars beneath ice. I called you pet when I didn't understand you. I called you danger when I feared what I felt. But now I call you something truer. She reached into her cloak and drew out a simple chain. On it hung 2 rings, hers and his. She took his hand and placed it in his palm. I call you husband, not just in defiance, not in secrecy, but in front of stars, in front of an empire. He closed his fingers around the chain. Then he kissed her. When they returned to Earth, word had already spread, not just through Dominion systems, but across hidden channels through refugee bands, pirate codes, and forgotten military beacons. The message was simple. A Sorelli commander married a human. They were building a world where no one would be caged for loving. Fleets arrived slowly, a dozen ships, then 50, then 100. Not warships, but vessels carrying families, scholars, defectors, even quiet Dominion officers who chose peace. The outpost grew, became a township, then a haven. At the center stood their home, no longer hidden, no longer guarded, and above it, engraved into the stone arch of the gate, let love defy stars. Valera stood beside Riven, watching a new generation of humans and aliens play in the field of violet ferns. The air shimmered with life. He spoke without looking at her. You still miss command? She shook her head. I never lost it. I just command something different now. He laughed. An empire of wild children and rogue poets? She smiled. An empire of the chosen. He slid an arm around her. And I'm still your husband? She leaned into him. Forever. Not as rebellion, not as proof, just as truth. And so, where once there was only ruin and silence, rose a place the stars would never forget. Not because of weapons or conquest, but because 2 hearts refused to kneel to anything but each other.